I think it's no secret that as time has gone on in our Gen Z lives, we're starting to see that dating is really, truly cooked. And it seems like it's not getting any better as time goes on, and it just keeps going down this deep, dark rabbit hole of constant negativity where both sides are blaming each other, where you have women blaming men for, not being traditional and that chivalry is dead and, where have all the good men gone? And then you have on the other end of the aisle where men are blaming women that, women are kind of just screwing around with hookup culture and men are going their own way, going down the hustle culture even then. And that, there's no more traditional women left. Dating apps are completely screwed in women's favor and it's hurting men and men are becoming lonely and all this stuff that I did talk about in my last video on if dating was dead. And after a long delay, I figured it was time to make a follow-up to that video and respond to it. And the only way I could think of truly responding to that video was highlighting some comments that I read through that I think can hopefully give a good insight onto the problems and maybe potential solutions, as well as my own solutions on how we can hopefully get things going in the right direction. Because complaining about this issue isn't going to get us anywhere. Just bitching and moaning about something like this, providing no solutions or any sort of fixes whatsoever, isn't going to help the problem. It's easier to complain, but it's harder to criticize and come up with a solution. And it's something that I've even struggled to come up with. But without further ado, let's talk about it. And full disclosure, I want to thank everybody that has commented on that last video. And I just want to thank again the people that I am highlighting. This is in no way calling you out or hating your opinion. I'm just using your guys' comments to help dictate the topic of this video, as well as to give me something to springboard and start a discussion about. So, anyway, I am going to start with the pinned comment that I think highlights everything pretty well by the user Broken Cornholio 1537. I understood that reference there, little Beavis and Butthead reference. But I'm not going to read the entire thing, but I'm basically going to read a good chunk of it. So here it is. The problem with dating is that most people take themselves way too seriously. Really to the point they've become pathetic cartoon parodies of themselves. A bad joke. I've heard every excuse. You play too many video games. You don't go hiking enough. You don't do enough of this. You don't do enough of that. Needless shaming and finger pointing that doesn't actually do anything but crush someone's spirit. Instead of trying to understand a person for who they are and lifting them up to be the best that they can be, where it truly matters. Rather than giving honest, decent people a chance, they're stomped into the dirt and backs are turned on them because they're not an ideal. Chasing ideals instead of people afraid of being human, that's why things are screwed up. Here's the reality. Most people are average. They have their ups and downs, strengths and weaknesses. It's not money, status, or muscles that make a good person. Principle, conviction, and standing tall against all odds makes a person, embracing the chaotic hardships of life, the human condition, and learning from it. Now that's a lot to take in there, and obviously there's more to the comment. But Broken Cornholio makes a good, fair point. And I think the biggest problem that really is overarching everything is the fact that it's just, there's a lot more average people out there, people like you, me, because if you were not average, you would be Mr. Giga Chad or Chad in general, making six figures and owning a house, Lamborghini, all this expensive materialistic stuff. Because it doesn't fit in the narrative of being ideal. And that's what dating, at least with what Broken Cornholio is saying, has kind of turned and divulged into, is that people are just chasing ideal versions of other people instead of giving average people, average Joes like you and me, a chance, because people want perfection, when perfection is just not possible. I mean, even if we break it down fundamentally, human beings cannot be perfect. It's just not possible. And it's that lack of understanding and just throwing excuses to solve a problem, when in reality that's not going to help anything whatsoever, and it's just only adding to this problem and making things even worse. Because segueing into the next comment by the user Madzune2228, he says, as someone who shares the sentiment that Gen Z dating is cooked, from my experience, the majority of women will try to date the top 10% of men. So everyone is going to go for the 10 out of 10s, including the 3 and 4 out of 10s. This is how situationships happen. The top 10% of men get the attention from 90% of women. The only way to win this system is becoming a 10% man, and as someone who's done this, it's completely unfair. And to add on to this point, it's also very unrealistic. Not every single man can reach that 10%. You could put all the effort in the world, do everything. You could work 12-hour shifts where you're just grinding 7 days a week, and you may not attain or reach that goal, and you end up becoming a workaholic or something else happens. It's just not realistic. Some people can reach that point. I'm not trying to shoot down anyone's dreams or anything, but that's why it's called the 10%. And, maybe it is a bit generalization that it can get the attention of 90% women, but it's more of the majority of women. A lot of women want to reach guys that have high attainable goals or have high worth, or rather are in the top 10%. Because idea of this that I've heard from, the hustle culture and all the top G Andrew Tate wannabes is that women want to be financially secure and have that high status, or at the very least have some sort of security of some kind, which is something I can understand to an extent. If you want to get into relationships with somebody and they're constantly having money problems, they're gambling, they're having all these issues, then that is logical concern, and I think anyone would agree, both men or women, because men and women can be susceptible to gambling and financial struggles and problems, or bad financial decisions in general. But there is this idea going around that you have to make X amount of money to be considered financially stable. Now, obviously, inflation and prices going up and all these other financial struggles in the housing market isn't helping, but you don't really need to have six figures to survive in a household. Now, yes, it would be very nice and helpful, but, it's not the end-all be-all. But there's just been this weird drilled-in stigma of some sorts for both sides that you have to have X amount of money to survive. And it's just not always the case. But that's where the argument comes into play of, both parents working, and it can help fulfill that, loss of income or that more income needing to not only sustain the both of you, but also when children get mixed into the picture, you're going to need more money because now you have another human being under your roof, which again creates more stress and then maybe starts having both sides question the financial stability of their relationship. And it always just comes down to money, which, can be one of the leading causes of divorces, which is another reason why a lot of people, even myself, are scared to go into that dating scene, is because of the rising divorce rates. And which segues us into the next comment by Razor Knight 92, where the part of the comment I'll be highlighting is, rising divorce rates have now progressed to rising rates of singleness at all ages, and most tragically for young adults. Many people are more afraid of the consequences of a relationship than they are in the pain of being alone. And I think that's pretty much valid because the marriage laws are truly in dire need of a restructure, at least in America, because it's not an easy 50-50 split where one side could take the other side of the cleaners and that side loses all their assets and everything and maybe even lose custody or seeing their kids ever again. It's these stories that I think all of us have heard, and that I even mentioned in my last video with the Johnny Depp and Amber Heard trial, which thankfully it didn't go that sort of route, but still it's that fear for average guys, again, that they could be taken to the cleaners and lose everything that they own. And it is a scary reality. And it does seem like that when you put all these things together, dating truly is dying. And all these problems and issues are valid reasons to bring up. Stuff that I brought up in my last video on this subject. And it just seems like when you bring all these together, it doesn't seem there's a solution in sight. And it's just, what else can be done? And obviously, when it comes to the marriage and divorce stuff that is sort of out of our control. Obviously, I think one of the solutions is having a good prenuptial agreement and making sure it's airtight, nobody's under duress, and both lawyers and parties agree that this needs to be the groundwork and what's laid in front of you. I'm sure somebody out there who's a lot more experienced in this kind of stuff could elaborate it further than me. But having those prenuptial agreements and sort of things laid down on the table so that if things tragically do go that route, at least that fear of being taken to the cleaners and losing everything that you worked hard for is not there anymore. But again, guess it depends on the states or where you are and all that. So that's stuff, again, that's out of our control. But what about just the dating part? Let's just worry about the dating part. What solutions could we provide to help solve this sort of crisis that we're living through right now? So here's two comments from TLSH12 and Your Worst Nightmare 6513. First, let's start with go outside. Don't date through a social media app and work out. And he also mentions, if I saw a girl I liked, I walked up and casually said hi, then I wrote my number calmly and gave her the sheet. If the girl thinks you're attractive enough, this both makes her feel special and makes you look confident and spontaneous. That might actually be something, at least for people that have social anxiety or scared to approach a woman, that might actually be a good sort of tip there. And obviously, there's probably going to be more rejections than actual callbacks, but it is a nice solution. And then segueing into your worst nightmares comment, my advice is find something you love, something like a hobby. Just do what you love, get good at it, and be proud of yourself. Gain trust in your abilities. Being happy, fulfilled, passionate about something is what makes you attractive. Then just create opportunities. Be present in other people's lives in one way or another, especially when you least expect it, opportunity arises. Again, I think these are both two good solutions and options here that I couldn't have said any better than myself. And I think that's where it comes down to is, putting yourself out there on some level. But my also hat in the ring that I'd like to throw in is don't make it obvious that you're joining a hobby or doing a hobby because you want to pick up chicks. Believe me, they will pick it up very sooner than you realize. There was a few people I knew in high school that went into dancing hoping or rather even one of them wanted to become a cheerleader, like a male cheerleader, hoping that they were going to, pick up some chicks. It doesn't usually work because then they just view you as the sort of gay best friend sort of stereotype angle. So don't really do it just for that. Just do it because you actually want to learn how to dance. And finally, one solution I want to also throw in for myself is just get comfortable with yourself and being alone. And at the very least, and I've said this many, many times, if it doesn't happen, you at least became comfortable being alone and with yourself instead of prioritizing, chasing women instead of focusing on cleaning the house that's within you so that when women come up to you and they open the door, they see that it's a clean and well-organized house. I hope that metaphor or analogy rather worked. I was really trying to make it work because it just popped in my head and I really liked it. But I think it makes a lot of sense when you break it down. And in terms of a timeline, since I know someone out there is probably wondering, well, how much time do we have? I wish I could give a good frame, but I think just starting here is the best thing we can do. Starting small instead of, going right into thinking big. Think small right now. That could lead to figuring out a big solution. It's at least how I sort of look at it. But personally for me, I think there's just still a lot of complications with this whole situation because it's easier said to do all these things that I've listed in this video. But at the end of the day, it's actually the execution and seeing the results, which that's where things can get a little bit trickier and maybe don't plan as well out as we would hope. So in terms of a timeline, I don't think that we should be rushing to get this done as soon as possible, like as if, the clock's ticking, like doomsday's about to hit. But at the same time, it does feel like as we get older, our options start to shrink more and more as time goes on, and there is that fear of missing out. So that's up to you as a person on whether or not you feel like you have to rush this now or you just want to trust and wait the process. For me, that's kind of the route I want to look for because I definitely will be thinking about some of these solutions more from these comments that I've provided in this video. But everybody's got their own limit in terms of socialization. Everybody's got their introverted or extrovertedness in them, how it makes them feel comfortable to do anything. But I hope that these solutions at least maybe can get the ball rolling for some ideas that maybe other people have. And if you do have some ideas, please leave them in the comments down below because I definitely want to keep the discussion going more and more about this, but I don't want to make it a doom and gloom discussion because I still think there is time to solve this issue and at the very least help people still have faith that, dating isn't completely, truly dead. But it is, I think, dying. To answer my original video still, is I do think it is starting to die, and we need to start correcting course and fixing this, because if we don't, we're going to have a catastrophe on our hands, and it's just, we got to stop and find solutions now and work to solve this for a better tomorrow. And that's how I'm looking at this whole situation right now. So anyway, I think that's all I have to say on this video. A little bit long video here, but hey, it is a big topic and I'm more than happy to keep this discussion going in a follow-up video and we'll just go from there. So anyway, feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. Hit the notification bell to know when I go live. We're still on the road to 300 subscribers by the end of the month. As of recording, I'm at 269, so there is still a possible chance. However, we'll see what happens just because of the personal thing that happened in my life. I don't think we'll be reaching the goal this month. But who knows? You guys have proven me wrong before, so maybe this time we'll reach it once again. So anyway, I will see you guys Thursday with another video. Y'all take care and have a good rest of your day.